Think. Act. And prosper. You are now tuned into the Money Level Show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Money Level Show, where we think, act, and prosper. And today we are joined with the green chicken himself, Doomberg. How you doing? What's going on?
Daryl, good to be back with you. Hope that you had a great holiday season and a great start to 2025. We certainly have. So looking forward to getting caught up again.
Yes. Thank you for joining again. And I'm interested in hearing, what your outlook is for 2025. Obviously a new year, but things are brewing, things are happening.
I'd say, yeah, that's probably an understatement. Look, 2025 begins next Monday, I think, with the inauguration of Donald Trump as the 47th president. Everything that's sort of happened thus far in the year is in anticipation of that event. Let's hope it goes off without any unexpected twists or turns. Lord knows it's been quite the odyssey over the past 12 months in the U.S. political system. Assuming that next Monday goes off without a hitch and President Trump takes office, then I think we're in for an awful wild ride. He is, no matter what your views of the man, he is an incredible force, a force of personality, a political force. He's really unlike anything I think we've seen in this generation of political leaders. Who would have thought a month ago we'd all be sitting here wondering and discussing the plausibility of Canada and Greenland and the Panama Canal becoming part of the U.S. Sphere of influence at a minimum, or perhaps even U.S. territory, taken to the extreme. Just goes to show you what the man is capable of. The big themes we're looking for in 2025, of course, are whether and how the war in Ukraine can be brought to a close, whether and how the situation in the Middle East can be stabilized, and whether and how Trump will be able to get his domestic energy agenda either through Congress or accomplished via executive order, and all of the second and third order impacts that flow from those three main events. But those are the three big ones on the board. Again, all of this is assuming that nothing crazy happens between now and next Monday, which of course is an assumption, especially given the recent history.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So there has been a lot of talk about Greenland and Canada. We had Trudeau just resign, and then the issue of Panama, and what could that even look like? Just kind of think.
This is Trump. He's got us thinking. Well, let's take them each in order. Canada is not going to become part of U.S. sovereign territory. And I think this was part Trump trolling Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau, of course, has since resigned, part of a wave of Western leaders that are being swept aside to the dustbin of history as Trump ascends to the presidency. We're seeing, governments all over Europe buckle under the strain of the Trump effect. What Trump is doing with Canada, we believe, is, rattling the cage for a more constructive, mutually beneficial relationship between the two countries, and the fentanyl trade, tighten the borders, maybe talk tariffs, and so on. And once Canada holds its own election, and if the polls are any indication, a new conservative leader comes in that Trump probably respects much more than Justin Trudeau, I think we'll see some form of a peaceful resolution between these two countries, which, by the way, represent the largest bilateral trade in the world. The trade between Canada and the U.S. is intimate and intertwined and huge. I think Trump is very serious about Greenland, and whether Greenland actually becomes part of the U.S. as sort of a sovereign territory or just de facto. I think that's where this is heading. Greenland's prime minister, I guess, was out saying that the country wishes to have independence from Denmark, which is understandable. There's only, 70,000 people on the island. This is all about the Arctic. And that is the sort of grand geopolitical prize on offer in the next 20 to 30 years. And the U.S. is, at the moment, sort of a minor player in the Arctic, just given where the borders are drawn. We have some participation because of Alaska. By the way, like the U.S. acquiring territories is not like all that unusual. We bought Alaska. Obviously, the Louisiana Purchase is a big part of U.S. history. And I believe the U.S. will get some form of its way in Greenland, and we already have military bases there and all that stuff. Panama is an interesting one. Trump has long bemoaned that Jimmy Carter basically gave the Panama Canal back to Panama for $1 near the end of his term. And there was a condition on that transfer, which was that foreign actors would not gain control over the Panama Canal. And Trump is making the case that China has de facto control over the canal, and he's unhappy about it. That one actually, I think, might escalate. It's not like the U.S. hasn't invaded Panama before. The Panama Canal is a critical strategic chokehold. That's in many ways, of course, the easiest one to dispatch, which is a relatively small area. It's very clear that the U.S. has a vested interest in the Panama Canal. It built it, and this is in the backyard. But the holistic view that if you take a step back, something we wrote about last year, never imagining that Trump would implement. But we wrote about the Monroe Doctrine last year, and what appears to be happening is we're heading towards this multipolar world. NATO has lost the war in Ukraine. I think Trump recognizes that. He wants to compete against China economically. And if we marshal the full resources of the Western Hemisphere, Greenland included, with the U.S. at the epicenter, that's a pretty formidable economic foe. We have all we need over here. We don't need to be messing around in the Middle East. We don't need to be messing around on Russia's border. Frankly, we don't need to be messing around with Taiwan. We have plenty in our own neighborhood. Oil, gas, fertilizer, food, labor, lumber, rare earths, and all of the missing things that China controls. A lot of that's in Greenland, which is a motivation for Trump. So if you just take a step back holistically, sort of if you go back to the spheres of influence geopolitical phase, I think this is where Trump is headed. The U.S. might not be the sole global superpower now, but it still can be the strongest if it gets its act in order, both domestically and in the region.
Yeah, yeah. So I was reading an article where J.D. Vance did talk about developing and making use of the natural resources in Greenland. And I was kind of wondering, like, okay, if we were to acquire Greenland and to even get the infrastructure set up there to extract natural resources and such, that seems like years to get going. What's your take on that?
Absolutely, decades really, but Trump is thinking beyond his term, which I think is interesting. Trump is, unless something changes, i.e. the Constitution is amended, Trump is not going to run for president again. So he can only be thinking about his legacy. I suppose in the first 2 years, he could be thinking about the congressional election, the midterm, so that he can get even more done in years 3 and 4. But really, he's not running again. He's in his 70s. He's been through quite the meat grinder, the ups and downs. And I think he's had 4 years to ponder what went wrong when he first ascended in 2017 and how he was treated, and then the election in 2020, and then the comeback. And I think after a while, you get a little sentimental, perhaps, or you start to think beyond, your own existentialism, and you think the legacy you want to leave the country and so on. And now, look, I mean, I think it's outrageous that Trump is just like looking at the map and saying, we'll take that and we'll take this. I mean, this is not how sovereign borders are changed. So there's, as often with Trump, there's a deeper meaning that is interesting, and the tactics sometimes are questionable. Like in my mind, if Greenland declares independence and then decides not to join the U.S., we're going to invade them, and then how do we justify that versus our stance in Ukraine, right? I mean, we can't. That's pretty hypocritical if we were to do such a thing. But I don't imagine it comes to that. Panama Canal is different. There's a history of U.S. sovereignty, at least sort of a gray area there. But Greenland is cut and dry. Like, that's not our territory. And people live there, and they have a right for self-determination. And it would be silly for us to just assume we can invade Greenland because we're strong, and then claim that we hold any higher, more ground over Putin and Ukraine.
Got it. So what are some of the things. I mean, Trump's only in office 4 years. I mean, right now we have the red sweep at least in for 2 years. I think there's I don't know how many Republican seats are up for the Senate coming in 2026, but like what realistically can we see change in the next 4 years?
Um,
It,
sure, I'd say unfortunately a lot. And when I say unfortunately, I'm not making a commentary about the policy changes, but the means by which they will get accomplished, which is by executive order. And I think, we're putting out a piece probably tomorrow on this offshore drilling ban, and it's pretty outrageous that this is even possible, what Biden has done, let alone has become normalized. But Trump has 4 years to do the exact same thing, to turn the pen around, undo various things Biden has signed in, um, create new policy with the stroke of a pen of his own. This is not how the Constitution was meant. This is not how the framers envisioned the country to operate. And just because you agree with the policies that are being implemented by dictate does not mean that this is the proper way to go about things. But he can get an awful lot done with just the pen. He's going to have a much harder time getting things through Congress. Um, there are many people on the Republican side who are opposed to Trump and will secretly try to undermine him. But 2026 election is light years away in politics. But Trump will get an awful lot done, both through force of personality, the power of his pen, and he'll be able to push some things through Congress, for sure.
got it. And so thinking about, I mean, obviously, some of these things are thinking beyond his term. And I'm kind of wondering, like, how do you even redeem your legacy? I mean, recently, the felony charge came down and everything. And I was just kind of thinking, like, man, that's like a big black eye. But but I don't know. I'm just kind of just trying to process it all. It's
Sure.
very interesting times. We live in like historic times for sure.
So there are two ways to analyze that. One is that he's a convicted felon, and the other is that he is the victim of lawfare, and that he overcame it. And so I suspect in the long run, those charges will be overturned on appeal in New York. When you actually study the case, it's pretty clear, that this was a bit of a ram job, as we would say, to take business records, which, even if he did falsify the business records, and he claims that he didn't, and to somehow upgrade those to felonies, not only felonies, but 34 felonies. And then to show you how unserious all this was, the judge just decided to give him an unconditional discharge instead of, if you and I got convicted of 34 felonies, we wouldn't be sitting here as free people doing a podcast, I can assure you. So there's a lot of, we'll let history decide all of that. Trump obviously thinks it's nonsense, having, not studied the case too thoroughly. But it does show you just the power of the prosecutor, right? If they want to charge you, Daryl, they can find an excuse to charge you. In fact, the intro to the piece we're publishing tomorrow is on this really scary book called Three Felonies a Day. Basically, there's so many laws on the books and can be interpreted by prosecutors in so many different ways that the average American professional commits 3 felonies a day and they don't even know it. And so if everybody's a felon, nobody's a felon, because really what it comes down to is the prosecutor can decide who to charge and who not to charge. And that is like the antithesis of American jurisprudence. And so Trump is sort of a state level victim of that. And I don't think any serious analysis of that situation could an unbiased observer come away with the fact that Trump is a 34 times a felon. You might think the underlying behavior and, hush money, to for an affair that he had. But I mean, Bill Clinton did the exact same thing multiple times, and he's not a convicted felon. Lord knows Clinton did all kinds of things that if you and I did, we'd probably be in some legal jeopardy. So it is what it is. It's just an extension of raw politics and really a sign of how broken the U.S. political system has become.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. So thinking about this, I just recently read one of Lynn Alden's and Sam Callahan's articles on fiscal dominance, and it really opened my eyes to like how structural our debt and deficits are, and we have this concept of Doge, Department of Government Efficiency, coming in to try to clean up the mess. But some of our, many of our expenses are just like structurally. It's almost like you can't really turn it around. I mean, unless you go through Congress and Congress, ultimately they want the votes. And so when you look at this debt train that we're on, like it doesn't seem like that's going to turn around. Do you see anything can happen in there, or is that just going to get worse in this era?
Yeah, I don't know what Doge can actually get done. It has not been empowered by Congress to do anything. It's sort of an appendage to the Office of Budgetary Management, I believe. Um, and I think outsiders overestimate how difficult it is to fire a federal worker. We'll see. I mean, even if they did get some things done, of course, it would probably trigger at least a recession in the short term because government spending has become such a big part of GDP that if you contract it, then the overall economy contracts. I did see Lynn Alden's publication, and I have it open, but it's so long and comprehensive, which is her style, of course, and I'm huge fans of Lynn Alden, I should say. Haven't had a chance to read it in full yet, but it's certainly on my list of things to consume this week as we go about our work.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and then transition to energy, because energy is life. There's so right now we have president coming in that's wanting to reduce regulation around energy production. I was reading some of the major U.S. oil companies not necessarily wanting to increase production, and I know that's kind of like an issue within like the cycle where you increase production and then the price of oil comes down significantly. So just kind of wanted to get your take there, and then also your take on natural gas, because I guess from some of the charts I was reading, there's more natural gas that's being, I guess, discovered or drilled rather than oil itself. And I guess that depends on what specific area, whether you're looking at the Permian or whatnot. But just wanted to get your
Sure.
overall take on that.
Yeah, so Joe Baby Drill, people are trying to convince themselves that the oil and gas sector will demonstrate some discipline for a change. We would fade that. Even if some of the majors decide they're not going to drill as much as Trump would like, you have all manner of private actors in the U.S. market, and then the U.S. market is but one of a global market of intertwined oil production and demand. And OPEC is sitting on excess capacity. Argentina is developing their shale resources. China is drilling for oil. And the temptation, as you know, the sanctions on Russia, which Biden, I think, were deeply ill-advised, has driven oil prices higher, which is going to trigger more production. So not much has changed in the oil markets in our view. I think Joe Baby Drill will be real. That is a headwind for the price of oil and for E&P equities. Natural gas is a different beast, of course. We're swimming in natural gas here. But at the same time, we've had a pretty brutally cold winter in the US. And also there's this bridging AI data center demand for natural gas that I think is going to be the story over the next couple of years, which is something that we've written pretty extensively about. And so, natural gas is probably the most interesting molecule on the board. U.S. natural gas, LNG, China, pipelines to Russia. We just did a long deep dive for our Doom Zoom Pro tier last week on the gas wars between Russia and Europe and what that means for the global market. So that's right for a lot of Doomberg analysis in 2025.
Okay, got it. So there's a lot of countries that are looking to up their production, and they're currently drilling, and that could likely push down the price of oil in the near term.
Yeah, well, I mean, we might see it go up because of these sanctions, and then once the black market figures out a way to do all of the workarounds, which they always do, because the spice must flow, as we say, um, the price will come back down. Um, we'll see, China demand, engine switching in China away from diesel towards LNG. There's a lot of moving parts in the energy markets, which of course makes them endlessly interesting.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So there's a lot of fear about the. Even right now we got the California fires going on, and the issue of climate change. I've heard different takes on this issue. Those that believe it's a hoax, and those are like, hey, it's simple. Never carbon is trapped in the atmosphere. It increases the warming of the earth. It's science. Um, Now we have a red sweep, which some of the I don't want to say all of it, but like some of the climate change narrative, like look is viewed differently upon the people that are in office now. And
Yeah.
so I'm kind of wondering what does that even look like, or if a lot of these policies are going to be reversed and
Oh,
such.
I mean, I think Trump is a baseball bat to the kneecap of the ESG movement. I think climate change as a dominant narrative in corporate boardrooms is all but over, especially in the US, perhaps some holdouts in Europe. We're seeing all the major banks pull out of these net zero initiatives. We're going to see natural gas being burned to power data centers. And I think whatever your views on climate change, the arrival of Trump means the end of that as a major issue in the US. There'll still be some noise, there'll be some echoes, but 4 years of reprieve for those who don't think it's all that big of a deal. And look, let's not kid ourselves. I mean, the forest fires, the wildfires in California have nothing to do with climate change. I mean, this is years of huge mismanagement of state water supplies. I mean, they've been deluged with rain in the past 2 years, and they didn't fill any reservoirs. Years of failure to do proper, brush management and you know risk control after several devastating wildfires already broke out. I think this is a huge competency crisis. I think it's the end of Gavin Newsom as a political force. I think he has no hope of meaningful national presence after this. I think it is a fitting end to the Biden administration in many ways. It's a catastrophe. It's a failure of government in its most basic duties. And if anybody claims that this is climate change, they're just being raw and overtly partisan, and they shouldn't be trusted on any other issue as well.
Yeah. This is huge. Like I was looking at like just how much. I mean, people's lives being destroyed. Some people that I know that I've interviewed on the channel that have been impacted significantly, and then huge public figures with a lot of influence. Having to
Yeah.
evacuate and lose their homes, and so I was thinking like the magnitude of what that could mean for Gavin
Oh, I
Newsom.
mean that this is like the beating heart of rich Democratic politics. I mean, Palisades, are you kidding me, right? I mean, this is the upper crust of the Democratic Party power machine in California, and they're angry. And I don't know if you saw Adam Carolla's epic rant about how they're going to have a lot of fun trying to rebuild. And I note with great interest that Newsom signed an executive order allegedly waving away all the red tape. Well, if that red tape is unnecessary during times of emergency, why do we have it during regular times? Why does it take 3 years to put a swimming pool in your backyard? So a lot of this is, just San Francisco crime, poor management, bureaucratic red tape, people leaving the state. This is a sort of a perfect storm. Look, I should say, of course, it's a tragedy. Feel awful for people who've lost their homes. As someone who is a prepper, this is sort of my worst nightmare. Really a sad, terrible situation. Once we get through it and the fire's under control, there will be serious ramifications, I think, for the leaders. I don't see how the mayor of Los Angeles survives this as a political entity, and I don't see how Gavin Newsom survives it. The buck has to stop with somebody. What's the point of being the governor if you're not the person responsible for what happens in your state? And this is a catastrophe of the highest order, and it really an embarrassment to the country that this is what the international world is seeing as well, an iconic city. Like Los Angeles is an iconic city. San Francisco is an iconic city. California is an iconic state. How is it that it came to be in this situation? I think it is something that we have to have a deep national conversation about.
Yeah, and that could change, like, because I don't remember if Arnold Schwarzenegger was a Republican or whatnot. I knew he kind of had some more conservative policies from things that I've heard in the past, but because I think Gavin Newsom came in right after, or
No, Jerry Brown was before news. Schwarzenegger was a Republican, but not sort of like at the national level. I mean, he's a California Republican, let's put it that way. I do think, you know, if we see meaningful change in California, I'm not saying that California is going to flip red, but if California did flip red, no Democrat could ever win the presidency again, right? I mean, let's be honest. So that it's a meaningful earthquake within the Democratic Party. Um, and we shall see. Again, much depends on next week and once Trump comes in and so on. And um, Trump said something very interesting. All this talk about the popular vote, right? I mean, the election was decided in 7 swing states. Nobody campaigned in California, New York, or Texas, or even Florida. And Trump said, if the presidency was decided by the popular vote, I'd have spent all my time in California, right? And it's like, just because we assume California is a blue state today doesn't mean it has to be. If Republicans started to pay attention to it, if Trump started to pay attention to it, things could get pretty interesting. So we'll see. It's sad though. I mean, like there's just no circumventing the fact that it's just amazing to see. It's cataclysmic. I mean, this is what you imagine sort of Dante's Inferno looks like. Literal hell. I mean, I feel terrible for the people that had to evacuate and lost their homes and lost lives and lost their memories, the pictures and their memoirs and all the things that make up your home. Like your home is your nest. This is deeply intertwined with the human endeavor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're definitely devastating. I've had a few friends go through some personal house fires and such, and so yeah, it was very devastating for them. Um, so as we get ready to close out, I'd like to get your take on Argentina. So I recently started doing some more research on Argentina, and I've seen like how much their market, like their stocks, have shot up since the election of Javier Milei. Um, and he calls himself a anarcho-capitalist, and he's also shown some admiration of Donald Trump and in some instances and such, and so it looks like Argentina is starting to turn around and or whatnot, and just wanted to get your outlook there if you have any.
Yeah, I think we wrote a piece on this earlier this year. In fact, the development of their shale resources, I think, is a key part of his turnaround plan. Look, he has gone all in on America, frankly, all in on Trump, and is running a massive experiment, pulling the Band-Aid off as quickly and as thoroughly as he can. Hope he succeeds. I hope for the people of Argentina he succeeds. Argentina used to be a global power, an economic force. It has enormous resources, enormous potential, great institutions, and if they could pull themselves out of the spiral that they've been in for the past several decades, I think they could reascend to their rightful position as a global power, both economically and financially and energetically. And to the extent that he is successful, maybe that catalyzes other changes across, the southern hemisphere. And we certainly would applaud it. He's an interesting character, of course. One wonders if he's not sort of playing a role, but it's fun to see. And hopefully, we know we have some friends in Argentina, and again, the country has such potential, and it's a shame when leadership lets you down. Very similar to what we see in California. California has enormous potential, and so yeah, let's hope for nothing but the best for Milei and his efforts in Argentina.
Yep, definitely. And so, just as we close out, what are some of the key commodities that you are kind of thinking about for this year? So I know we've talked about oil, natural gas. There's many others. What are some of the key commodities on your radar for this year?
Yeah, we're watching obviously the natural gas situation in North America in particular. Um, that includes Canada and frankly Mexico, and how that trade sort of equilibrates in the face of new demand from AI and so on. Keeping a close eye on gold as well, and the reaction to the Trump presidency. I think the latest sanctions on Russia only drive foreign central banks into accumulating more gold at the expense of U.S. treasuries. And so gold is on the radar, silver's on the radar. Doing a little bit of a dive on platinum. Haven't published anything yet. Interesting metal, sort of transitioning from a monetary one to an industrial one, which is probably what's holding up silver as well. So lots to study in 2025, and it's going to be another great year for Doomberg, I hope.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, platinum's pretty interesting, especially with the usage in uh, carbon emission vehicles. gas powered vehicles, and it's going to be interesting just to see how this plays out for Elon Musk. I know he gets a lot of kind of benefits of people getting these subsidies from electric vehicles, and so
Yeah, he's
that's
probably
kinda
a
interesting.
subject of a full podcast by himself.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Doomberg. Well, appreciate you for coming on. Glad to see you this new year, and hope to have you back.
You bet.
Where can people find more about you?
Everything is at Doomberg.com. Nice and simple. DOOMBERG.com. Daryl, it was great. Looking forward to talking to you again. Have a great 2025.
All right, you too. All right, take care.